In March, beginning of March, Madagascar will hold the ICE conference that will touch and go deep into blue economy. So we've been having a series of sessions leading up to that. We started with the introduction to blue economy just last year. Then earlier this year, we did geopolitics to understand geopolitics. And today we are discussing deep sea mining and its effects on the blue economy. So thank you very much for joining us. We have Kaiser De Souza, we have Christina, we have Vita. Your second name is really hard to Onwaswanya. Did I get it?
That's good.
Perfect. And Jeremy Webb. So thank you very much for joining us from whichever parts of the world you are. And my name is George Ndirango. So we would like to get things started. We've been held up. Time has not been on our side, but we want to get things started, and we want to start with. Let us start with Kaiser as a geologist, and since we are touching on deep sea mining, maybe you can tell us. We want to know the situation that Africa is in right now. Could you please tell us the status of Africa and the East African region in particular in terms of deep sea mining, and then we'll take it up from there.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me for this conference. It's a great pleasure to start to debate this subject. To tell about the mining in Africa, I would prefer first to say, because we are talking about opportunities. And it is important to mention that the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea says that every coastal country has the right to have economic exclusive zone. And if we take all the exclusive economic zone from Africa countries, we will see that Africa has about 7 million square kilometers of EEZ, economic exclusive zone. So in different parts of the world, governments and private companies start to explore this area. Africa starts to do some work, but has a lot to do. And when we talk about the economic exclusive zone, we have mineral resources like sand and gravels that are used for civil construction and for rebuilding eroded coastline. We have places with diamonds and gold. We find in Africa a lot of diamonds, for example. We have a lot of mineral resources used for agriculture, like carbonates, phosphorites, potassium. And of course, we have oil and gas, also coal and gas hydrates. This is the main mineral resource that we can find in the continental shelf of the coastal countries. Also, we should say that the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea allowed every country to explore beyond the 200 miles, beyond its economic exclusive zone. So the seabed in the international area is open for every nation. So it's also important that African countries start to take a look in this area, because we see that close to the Africa continental shelf, there are a lot of areas that were required from other countries. From China, from Korea, and so on. So it is important. And the main mineral resources that we can find in these areas are the polymetallic nodules, the cobalt-rich crusts, which are very rich in manganese, nickel, cobalt, and copper. And they have all kinds of earth elements, which are used for electronics, for high technology industries. And also we can find polymetallic sulfides, very rich in gold, silver, zinc, platinum, and other elements. But I believe that it is important for Africa to start to increase the knowledge of the seabed and the subsoil in the continental shelf, and also in the international seabed areas, and collect the necessary information to allow integrated management. So there are a lot to do, but a lot of possibilities. So I believe this is a great opportunity for Africa to start to deal with the mineral resource at the sea.
All right, thank you very much, Kaiser. Maybe you can just switch to Vita for a minute. Now, Kaiser has listed down and detailed what we have, the potential that the deep sea mining has. But do you think we have enough information to go about exploring all these opportunities that Kaiser has talked about? You, on your legal, giving a legal point of view, do you think we have enough information to go ahead with this?
Right. Thanks, George. And I just want to sound a word of caution because owing to the delays, my battery is running out here and I'm trying to come up with an alternative on my phone. So I might get cut off and have to rejoin the conversation. But just taking a step back, of course, talking about whether we're ready or not, I'm very happy, of course, that Kaiser started with the reference to the Convention on the Law of the Sea, which, as you know, is the overall overarching legal framework for all activities on the oceans and seas. So I think that's our point of departure, of course. That being said, whether in terms of whether we're ready, we know, of course, that in terms of what we have on the seabed and subsoil, there are certain things that are also not known to us yet in terms of what kinds of environmental impacts might result from exploration or exploitation. So I think perhaps we might, and I wouldn't want to be quoted, but we are on the cusp. But I think there is a lot of action that goes with it in terms of trying to understand the processes, their impacts, and the need for marine scientific research and other measures that need to be, area-based management tools to protect biodiversity and vulnerable marine ecosystems. So there's a balance, I think, that needs to be struck in terms of what's feasible, and also in terms of developing the appropriate soft and hard tools. So your institutional frameworks, your laws, your policies, your administrative regulations that need to actually be in place to be able to provide a sound basis in accordance with the convention, as well as other governance tools that are available. So that would probably be what I want to chime in at this point while I try to sort out my battery crisis.
Now, we understand that we want to bring it now to the East African region, and we understand that East Africa has limited knowledge, limited technological know-how, and limited infrastructure and personnel to deal with this. So how do we talk about reaching a level where deep sea mining can sustain an economy, yet the basics have not yet been touched on?
No, that's a very good question. We do have limited knowledge. We do have limited technical know-how in this area just yet. But we also have quite a bit of time available to us to get these things right. The first commercial deep sea mining operations are going to begin in 2016 in Papua New Guinea. And that will serve as a test bed for commercial mining. In the meantime, we need to prepare. Yes, we need to improve our knowledge on the resources available to us within our exclusive economic zones, but also outside our exclusive economic zones. I think as a region in East Africa, we have to decide whether we want to be an active player outside our exclusive economic zones, because certainly other countries are showing an interest in this. It's going to be an expensive business. But at the same time, we can partner with lots of different partners, but from private sector, other governments, and work our way to being better involved in these things. The private sector will obviously be keen to undertake exploration, but we can look at how our institutions can link with that. In terms of getting ready for the legal context, we can group our resources together and work together on common issues with not just in East Africa, but also we can partner with other parts of the world, such as the Pacific, where they're doing a lot of work in this as well. The key thing is to reach a balance between the cost of developing knowledge, institutions, and legal frameworks, with the fact that it's going to take a bit of time before these things come on stream. And I think by partnering and working together as a region may be the most effective way in this regards.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. You've talked about working together as a region, and I'll throw it back to Kaiser. Now, we've been given a time limit of 1 year, 2016, to start the deep sea mining operations, according to Jeremy. Now, you've worked with markets and emerging markets, and you've seen it from the ground up, how people develop this deep sea mining. What are some of the mistakes you think people normally make, or economies normally make, leading up to being a proper deep sea mining economy?
I think there is three very important factors that we need to take into consideration when we go to mining, or when we are trying to go to mining. First is the economical conditions. We need to have an analysis of the economical conditions at the time we are trying to do that, and in the near 20 years. We have to know about the technology that will be used. And and the third and very important factor is the environment. So we need to take these three conditions: the economical conditions, technological conditions, and environmental conditions. I think it would be a mistake if someone would start to look to mining without taking into consideration these three factors. So this is one thing. But the most important thing initially is to have information, is how to get information from the sea, from the fields, and this information should provide enough knowledge to work with these three different factors. This information can be collected at the same time. This is what most of the companies and the governments are doing. They go there, they collect the information to know if they have mineral resource, if they have economic value, but also to look to the environment where they are and study ecosystems associated to this. So I think for me, these three factors are important, and the mistake would be not to take them into consideration together.
All right, Jeremy, now there are some exclusive economic zones that I mentioned when we were talking about tabulating the whole blue economy. Now, in terms of deep sea mining, what exactly are these exclusive economic zones? Before we go to how they work.
Okay. I can't claim to be the expert on exclusive economic zones, but the key thing is they are exclusive, which means we have first priority and access to it, and we have to manage those areas. And we have, so what occurs within those areas, we have an opportunity to exploit for our own benefit. In the same way, when we have terrestrial minerals, i.e. minerals on land, if we have minerals in our exclusive economic zones on the deep sea, we have an opportunity there. So if we look at which countries have what kind of resources, Djibouti and Somalia have some massive sulfides, so that's gold, copper, lead, and other things. Meanwhile, Madagascar and the Seychelles are known to have some polymetallic nodules, manganese and other minerals. But our knowledge of what's in our own exclusive economic zones, as has been mentioned by some of our previous speakers, is fairly poor at the moment, and there's a lot of work to be done to find out what we have within our own exclusive economic zones.
You mentioned as well areas of region. There was a potential for regional collaboration. So Kaiser, could you please help us understand what potential areas we have, at least to make sure that areas within the region in East Africa can work together for the success of this deep sea mining collectively?
Yes. When we go to the sea, we need first to know what's there. The best thing to know it is to collect all the available information. And it is amazing when we start to collect information, we discover that we have huge quantity of data that we can bring together. And then this information would allow later to plan for new activities. So if I would suggest something for Eastern Africa, I would suggest first to organize the geology and mineral resource and environment of all the economic exclusive zone and adjacent oceanic crust in a kind of a GIS system where you can bring everything together and visualize what's there. So this is the first step. And then the second step would be to start to collect information in key areas, in the areas where we believe that are important under the mineral and also under the environmental point of view. I think this would be the first step for the East African countries. And of course, to do that, it's important to have a regional cooperation and also international cooperation, because most of these informations are in database or were collected for international organizations or national organizations from other countries. So it is important to work in cooperation, especially because the work at sea is very expensive. So this is what most of countries working at sea are doing. We work together.
Okay, and how far do you think, how long do you think we will take to reach this this level? How far do you think we have to go?
Well, I think to collect the existing information in a GIS system, I believe that in 1 year it could be. We could do that in 1 year and have this available for every country that would start to do some research. So the first step would be this. And then the second step would be start to do research at sea, the research for the mineral resource, mapping the seabed and so on. But to do that, we need to have much more a resource, because the work at sea requires equipped ship with technologies, and it is expensive. But I think this is a very important step, and it can be done by cooperation. This is what, for example, I did in Brazil, this kind of GIS system, and work in cooperation with different countries and different institutions to have more knowledge about the EEZ and adjacent oceanic area.
Jeremy, let's just look at it from a legal point of view before Vita comes back on. We have a few questions for her as well when she comes on. And now we have to explore suitable policy, legislative, licensing and regulatory frameworks to facilitate this. How do we go about it step by step, especially from an economy that has never done deep sea mining before? How do we go about this?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you raised that. I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is the Africa Mining Vision, which was adopted by heads of state in 2009 by the African Union. And this forms a framework for all of the things you just mentioned, not only the geology, but also the governance and participation, the policy and licensing, the linkages with other sectors in the economy, as well as then also the opportunity to build capacities. So under the Africa Mining Vision, we've been working as the African Minerals Development Centre to engage with countries and support them in what they want to do with their own minerals development. Of course, much of that has been focused on land, terrestrial mineral systems, but the same underlying principles apply to marine and deep sea mining as well. One of the key things that we find we have to do when we engage with a country is really look at expectations across the country and from different sectors, be it business, be it government, be it civil society and communities. While minerals might be worth a lot, there are a lot of different interests, there's a lot of capital involved, and all of these things require a return. So all of these things have to be managed in advance. So what we're encouraging as the African Minerals Development Centre in terms of a step-by-step approach is, let's first get that common vision, a country mining vision. And then once we've looked at the expectations, what has worked previously and what's working going forward, and the deep sea minerals are very much about what we're expecting for the future, based on good information, put together a vision and then say, okay, what does this mean for governance? What are the issues we're going to have to address here? Then from that, what are the policy, licensing, regulation issues we're going to have to deal? So this is where, for example, the environmental dimension is fundamentally important, along with the issues of royalties and revenues. In terms of linkages, there are downstream and upstream linkages. Upstream is where the operation itself has to purchase certain things to conduct its business. That could be food, that's safety equipment, in the case of this kind of activity, boats and other vessels and processing plants. But then there's downstream processing as well, but that's very technically difficult and a quite difficult market to break into by itself, but one we should certainly look at. And then from all of that, this is basically the view which we take in terms of how to address the issue, starting with a common vision, looking at the governance and participation issues, looking at policy, licensing, regulation, looking at the linkages within the economy, and then also how we can build capacities to better engage in each of these areas.
Thank you, Jeremy. Christina, are you back?
I don't know, can you hear me now?
Yes, it is. That's perfect. I don't know what you've done, but it's perfect.
I got a new computer. Slide it into the left here.
All right, so the question is still what we had before in your old computer. We want to touch on the constraints. Please guide us step by step how we do this sensitization of the people living near these areas that have this deep sea mining resources. How do we go about that?
Well, we need to engage the communities in these things. And it seems like the Kenya case that you should have stepped a little back and actually, before you even started getting people to do the exploitation and moving in instruments, having a conversation and community engagement in that level. If you do that, you also have a chance to actually have people engaged in the process. Maybe some have skills, maybe some can be educated to participate. And by that, you'll have a much more understanding of the process. You have a buy-in of the process. You have a protection of, because the people that are working in the industry, you have much more safeguards, I think, on the process if it's country owned. Another question to also ask is actually the country has to ask themselves, why do we want to exploit these resources? And what do we want to use the revenue for? And clarifying what the revenue will be and have plans for using the revenues and the incomes for long-term investments and long-term plans. If not, there's not really any use to do the exploitation in the first place.
Who normally has these conversations? Is it the government within which the region is being mined, or is it on your part identifying which body wants to do the deep sea mining? Who has these conversations on the policies?
I think we all have. The government should have set up some kind of system to do these things. We as an institution can help do these things, of course. What else to do? So, I know from my work in extended continental shelf issues, it was quite important that people were included in the process and the capacity building and actually learned a lot about their marine areas in that way. So I think engaging your citizens in the process have a huge impact and a huge capacity. And you can, after you're done maybe with your mining, you have very skilled people that can continue into other industries and continue using that wealth that has been generated to build other long-term and renewable maybe industries.
Thank you, Christina. Kaiser, back to you. When we were talking about geopolitics in a different session, there was the mention of pirates, evading of taxation. You've experienced some of these issues over and over, I'm sure, in your line of work. How do you tackle some of this?
Yes, concerning taxation, normally what is proposed for the sea is very similar to what countries are doing on land with the mineral resource on land. So most of countries have their regulations and taxations for the mineral resource, and they just apply it for the sea. But in the sea, because things are much more expensive and it requires much more study from environmental point of view and so on, there is a need to evaluate taxation and to see how much of this taxation can be applied from the continent to the sea. I mean, I don't know if I answer your question.
Well, that's true. But Jeremy, adding to what Kaiser said, there was also the issue that sometimes we have on the land, we have a place called no man's land in between two countries where no one has any jurisdiction over that land, no matter what the policies are in your particular countries. Now, we have the same kind of zones in the sea where no one has any jurisdiction of what happens there. So there's a lot of insecurity happening there. There's a lot of smuggling. There's a lot of insecurity. So how do we ensure that this is catered for as well? The special economic zones where the countries have their own jurisdiction and this no man's water, let's call it that.
Yes, that's a great question. Look, in the exclusive economic zones, they're very big, as Kaiser pointed out earlier. Policing them is difficult. At least in the case of the minerals, we will ideally be knowing who is there. It'll be pretty clear, pretty obvious, and but obviously there'll be others that might be able to approach them if you're talking about piracy and other things. And this is an issue for any vessel anywhere. But policing is going to be an issue, especially if we have vessels permanently moored at sea running operations on the seabed. As soon as you get outside this exclusive economic zone, you're in the high seas. And again, there are rules and laws about that. And I would expect probably the private sector will be really looking for support from governments in moderating any dangers and risks that come about from piracy or from anything else. But these are things which have to be worked on and decided because there's a cost involved at every stage. And who bears the risk is going to be a really key issue.
Thank you, Jeremy. You've added on to what Kaiser said. Now, we'd like to go to Vita. We've not heard from her for a while. Now, Vita, if you can hear me, as someone working for Division for the Ocean Affairs and Law of the Sea, what are your experiences that you could share with us in regards to a framework to guide this deep sea mining?
So, and just wanting to maybe pick up off of where Jeremy left off of with regards to the high seas and maybe connecting back to something that was said about the exclusive economic zone. Just to refer back to my earlier point that I made about the framework under the Convention on the Law of the Sea. Under the convention, the exclusive economic zone, of course, is a zone of where a coastal state would have sovereign rights and with regards to exploitation and exploration of the resource, living marine resources. Now, when it comes to the continental shelf, which is the seabed and subsoil below the exclusive economic zone, the coastal state also has that is considered part of the coastal state's territory. And for some states, that's where certain some mining could potentially take place. Now, when we're talking about, there was a mention of the continental shelf, extended continental shelf, which is the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles, which is possible for some states. With certain criteria under the convention, that might even extend up to 350 nautical miles. But the bottom line with regards to that was when it comes to exploration and exploitation of the non-living marine resources of that portion of the seabed and subsoil, the proceeds that come from there are actually for go to a benefit sharing exercise under the convention, which is actually managed by the International Seabed Authority, which is one of the bodies established by the convention. So it's you see that there is a mechanism that is actually already sort of in place for to guide governments, states, and other partnerships that states may have with private enterprises with respects to how how these activities are undertaken. Now, just to also add, with respect to, I heard mentions of no man's land, and which I would presume to be referring to two areas which are mentioned under the convention, which is the high seas. Now, the high seas are all parts of the sea that are not included in the exclusive economic zone, the territorial sea, and the internal waters of a state, or the archipelagic waters of an archipelagic state. So that would constitute your high seas. And then you have the area, which is the seabed and ocean floor and subsoil of that is beyond the limits of national jurisdiction. So those two parts of the sea are, I wouldn't call it a no man's land, but they are outside of the jurisdiction of states. Now, with regards to the high seas, you do have some high seas governance mechanisms, for example, under the fisheries regime, which and that I'll refer to the 1995 United Nations Fish Stocks Agreement. That's the short form of it. And related to that, there are regional fisheries management organizations and arrangements that have some governance frameworks with regards to fisheries. Now, also you have, for example, area-based management tools that are looking into the establishment of marine protected areas, for example, in certain areas that may also fall within the high seas, recognizing that, because the nature of that area is that it's beyond the national jurisdiction, there still is need for the protection and preservation of the marine environment. Now, turning to the area, which I think there was some allusion to also before me, like I mentioned, the International Seabed Authority is the institution that is mandated to regulate the exploration and exploitation of the resources of the area. And the catch to that, of course, is that it's for the benefit of all mankind. And so it's referred to as the common heritage of mankind. So everybody, the entire global community, is supposed to profit from activities that take place in that part of the seabed and ocean floor and subsoil. Now, related to that, of course, I would like to point out that the International Seabed Authority has come up with some regulations, which I'm sure perhaps people like Jeremy would be familiar with also, with regards to prospecting for minerals, certain minerals that are in the area. So what we see from all of this, and the point I'm just trying to make, is that there is a framework talking about some of the maritime crimes that were mentioned, for example, piracy. We know, of course, that there is international cooperation that addresses some of these crimes that take place outside of national jurisdiction. And so frameworks are in place and continue to evolve and develop to keep up with the changing, environment at sea, in order to have a kind of what we're looking for is an integrated kind of approach where all of these factors are being taken into account, and policies and regulatory frameworks that factor in all of these things. And I liked what Christina mentioned about participation, because that's a crucial component, of course, to all of this, because the people who are going to benefit from these things need to know, need to understand, need to appreciate the significance, including also the pros and the cons. In that regard, I would maybe point, for example, to the case of Namibia recently, with regards to the potential for phosphate mining in off of the coast of Namibia, whereby there was mobilization of civil society and people that were concerned about some of the environmental impacts that were unknown. So things like these are things that should be in the backs of our minds when we're talking about the prospects, the 2016 deadline that the African Union has proposed, And just to know that there are governance frameworks that are evolving, that are in place and also are evolving to address and to guide coastal states in these initiatives. I'm going to just stop there for a short while.
You answered all the questions we had for you while you were away, so thank you very much for that, Vita. Now we have no more questions left except only one to Christina, and then we'll wrap up because our time is coming to an end. Now, Christina, we've heard about all the benefits of having deep sea mining and regulations and frameworks and policies, but deep sea mining also, of course, has its flip side. It causes some disturbances. Could you please mention about the other side that we are not talking about, the negative side of deep sea mining?
Yes, I can. Some of the negative things would be creating a sandstorm on the bottom of the ocean where no light really comes down and nothing really happens, but it happens very slowly. And mining things like removing nodules from the seabed creates a lot of sand deposit, and you'll have habitat destructions. And ways to safeguard that, if you really want to go mine, if you decide that all the benefits are there, you have looked upon things that can go wrong, is to create marine protected area that looks a lot like the habitat you have in the area that you want to do the mining. And then you say, I might do this on a certain area. I have another area that looks the same way, that might have the same species. I'm going to do a marine protected area there and keep that. So in case we really make a mess, we have something there that we can maybe return to the place that we made a mess in. That's a way to do it. I think that's a strong way to do it. I also think we can look at, well, most of these countries that have offshore mining also have land mining. And I think it's quite important to see how that worked. Not just if the taxes system worked, but to see that what did we actually do on land? Did we well? Did we divide the revenue well among our citizens? And is there something that we should fix before we go offshore? Because when we go offshore, we can't see what we're doing, not as much as we can on land. And if we haven't control on the revenue distribution on land, there's chances that we might not have it when we go offshore either.
All right. Thank you very much, Christina. Now we've come to the end of our discussion, but before we leave, maybe we can just each and every one of you in your own line of work. We'll start with Kaiser. As a geologist, we know that Madagascar will be holding the blue economy discussion. We've mentioned it earlier. Now, do you have any last remarks regarding now your line of work leading up to that discussion?
I think that we start to do a very important thing is the discussion about the different aspects of mining. We need to continue to do this, and I look forward to meeting you in Madagascar to continue this discussion. And I think that together with the discussions, we need to find the possibilities or the means to go to the sea and start to do research, to collect information for identifying areas with importance for mineral resources and also for environment. I think we need to have the information, the right information, and then we can sit and decide how we conduct things. If you go to exploration or exploitation, or if you go not. If you declare some areas to be protected or not, but to do this, we need to have information. So I think this would be a very important aspect to discuss more in detail.
Thank you, Kaiser. Now, Jeremy, as well, as an expert in policy development and regulations, what are your last remarks leading up to the conversation that will be held in Madagascar?
One thing we're very much looking forward to is seeing how the process where we look at all the different steps, the information, how that ties into expectations, participation from different communities, forming a vision, and then moving into policy, licensing, regulation, and actual mining activities works. And we're very eager to see how the country mining vision processes that we've been working on can be applied in the marine context with the aim of improving development outcomes. And that is really the key of the Africa mining vision, is development outcomes. The only other thing I'm really interested in is seeing how regional cooperation can really work together to reduce the cost to individual member states so that we can be involved in this expensive business, but at the same time, not too expensive for any one individual country. Finally, I do have to make one clarification. I'm not aware of any African Union or other deadline for deep sea mining in East Africa or anywhere else by 2016. I think the point I was made may have gotten a little confused. There is deep sea mining starting, but that's starting way across in the Pacific and Papua New Guinea in 2016 as the first commercial operations. Elsewhere is exploration and other activities, including closer to home here in East Africa. But very much looking forward to joining all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for that clarification as well. Christina, now you as an environmentalist and understanding what goes with that, what are your last remarks leading up to the Madagascar Convention?
I hope that the participatory process can be very good, that we can have engagement from all stakeholders, and all stakeholders can be taken serious and can be included in the process. I hope we can learn a lot from the Pacific Regional Framework, where I've worked with a book on deep sea minerals. They have done a huge job, they have done a huge amount of research, and I think we can benefit from that. And I think we can include examples from all other parts of the world and learn from what they've been doing, and doing a good process of communicating what is going to happen and taking into consideration everyone else that are operating in the ocean space and on land, because they're going to have a lot of opportunities. No matter what we do, we might do some damage to someone else, and they're entitled to raise their opinion as well.
All right, thank you, Christina, for that. And finally, Vita, you gave us a lot of insight earlier in regard to these topics that we're talking about. But what are your last remarks now as we wind up our conversation?
Okay, so firstly, of course, to say that this is a very timely discussion, and from our perspective, of course, we're very keen to participate and to learn also about what's going on the continent, in the region, the sub-region, what are the potentials, and also the interface that can be made between the work that we do and how we can input to the initiatives. Talking also just as, coming from the Secretariat, our office is the Secretariat for the Convention on the Law of the Sea. So we are involved in a lot of work, including the work of the GA, which we provide support to with regards to some of these issues. And now, as some of you might know, there is a process that's ongoing within the General Assembly that is referred to as the Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group, ad hoc open-ended informal working group to study issues relating to the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity beyond areas of national jurisdiction. And most recently, at their meeting in January this year, there was a recommendation to move forward with the consideration of negotiations, or considerations for negotiations of an implementing agreement to the convention to regulate this. So you see that what I was referring to in terms of the evolving governance and regulatory frameworks with regards to areas beyond national jurisdiction, which is very relevant for deep seabed mining as well, and other activities that may take place beyond areas of national jurisdiction. And then one last thing I'd also like to point out, of course, is the work of the Commission on the limits of the Continental Shelf, which is very important when we think about the delineation of the outer limits of the extended continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles. So this expert body, is actually the one that actually considers the submissions of states in this regard, coastal states, with regard to their submission, makes recommendations on the delineation of these outer limits, which also, again, is something that's relevant for deep seabed mining because of the legal certainty that this kind of thing establishes in terms of the geographical scope of operations, as well as also the fact that the maritime spaces that I referred to this morning, the territorial sea, the exclusive economic zone, it's important for coastal states to delimit these these areas, including between and amongst themselves, because this gives also legal certainty in terms of what the maritime boundaries are for operations, and also to consider whether there's need for joint development, where there are overlaps. For example, just to go back also to what Jeremy was talking about, regional cooperation. So there is also the possibility for bilateral cooperation as well, where some of these issues may arise. So just to say in conclusion that we are very keen and interested and engaged in the debate, and would like to also see a grounding, of course, in the legal framework, which is most important to us, to ensure that everything is taking place within a proper context and in an integrated manner. And of course, looking forward to the fact of the post-2015 SDGs. We know that integration is a very important matter.
All right, thank you very much, Vita. I think we'll all agree that we've gained a lot of insight across the board in our different, in all your different areas of work. Now, we in Kigali, we really appreciate you, the four of you, taking your time to be here, and in Christina's case, at least dedicating 2 computers for this session. We really thank you for that. Now, allow me to stop there. Thank you very much for being with us, Kaiser, Jeremy, Christina, and Vita. We look forward to seeing you from March 2nd to 6th if you will be attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
George.
Thanks.
Have a nice evening or morning or afternoon wherever you are.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.